Hello there, guys. Hope you're well. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about notes that I got from reading this book, and this book is "Succeed" by Heidi Grant Halverson, PhD. And I just read chapter one, which was all about what the research tells us about how to actually set goals the right way. Just for some context about the book is about the scientific research, about what the scientists and the researchers discovered about how to actually become successful. And the first step of becoming successful is setting your goals. And that's what chapter one is about. That's what we're going to be talking about. If you're wondering why read this, at least for me personally, I kind of felt that it was easy to get lost reading a lot of self-help and self-improvement books because they're all very much think positive, do this, set goals. And it's like, okay, fair enough. What does the actual science say? And so that's why I'm reading this. And so without further ado, let's get into it. So this, by the way, is a book right here, Succeed. You can find it on Amazon. Succeed, How Will You Reach Your Goals by Heidi Grant Halverson, PhD. And so first, I guess groups, I put this into four sections. First group, which would be don't just do your best. So let's begin. Telling someone to do your best is a great way to motivate them, right? Most of us have heard this expression countless times. It's always meant well. Do your best is supposed to inspire you without putting on too much pressure. It's supposed to bring out the best in you. Only it doesn't. It's a really lousy motivator. That's primarily because do your best is very, very vague. Why? So, in the absence of a specific goal, do your best somewhat ironically tends to produce work that is far from the best, and it's a recipe for mediocrity. The alternative is to set specific, difficult goals. So Edwin Locke and Gary Latham, two eminent organizational psychologists, have spent several decades studying the extraordinary effects of setting specific and difficult goals. In more than 1,000 studies conducted by researchers across the globe, they found that goals that spell out exactly what needs to be accomplished and that set the bar for achievement high result in far superior performance than goals that are vague or set the bar too low. And so letting people know exactly what is expected of them removes the possibility of settling for less, and especially the possibility of telling yourself that what you've done is good enough, right? And so when what you're striving for is vague, it's too tempting to take the easy way out when you've gotten tired, discouraged, or bored. And the thing is, if you're trying to accomplish something really difficult, you probably will get tired, discouraged, and or bored, right? If you set a specific goal, you either reached it or you haven't. And if you hadn't, then you've got little choice but to keep on trying if you want to succeed. In other words, set ultra specific and challenging but still possible goals. Now, what about the difficult part? Isn't it dangerous to set difficult goals? Aren't I asking for trouble if I set the bar high? Well, difficult but possible is the key. That's because more difficult goals cause you to often unconsciously increase your effort, focus, and commitment to your goal. It causes you to persist longer and make better use of the most effective strategies. And so, for example, log haulers. So, in one study conducted in the early 1970s, Latham found that log haulers were carrying loads of logs to the lumber mill that were 60% of the legal weight limit, which on average was a situation that was wasting both time and company resources. But the log haulers did not have any specific goals or what they should be carrying for each load. So the researcher assigned them the goal of carrying loads that were 94% of the legal limit instead, right? Ultra specific. And he returned after 9 months and found that they were now averaging over 90% load capacity, saving the company what would be worth many millions in today's dollars. So, if you give log haulers the goal of carrying a lot more trees, it turns out they carry a lot more trees. And people pretty much do what is asked of them and rarely more, and that includes yourself. Therefore, set yourself difficult goals and your performance will rise to the challenge. Right? Point two, what should you visualize in your mind? Should you visualize your why or your what. And so your why is your big picture vision, right? This is what makes you want to uh, get out of bed. This is what, uh, like the big picture, what I want to do in my life. That's your why. Your what is the next concrete steps to take right now. So if you want to go for a run, the first step is to change into your running gear or your running clothing, right? And then it's tying your laces, tying your shoes, and then it's leaving the house, going for a run. These are very concrete steps. Um, and by the way, this will be very relevant to point 3, which is overcoming procrastination. Cool. So each mode of thinking under different circumstances can lead to greater achievement. The trick is to adjust your thinking according to your circumstances. And the good news is it's not all hard to do. You just need to learn when to think why and then to think what. So why should you think about your why? So thinking more abstractly about behavior can be energizing because you're linking one particular, often small action to a greater meaning or purpose. If we want to be really, really fit so that we age gracefully, right? And we look good while we age, that could be really motivating and can cut through the BS in our minds, right? And so the why of what you do is incredibly motivating. So it's not surprising that many of us often prefer to think of our own actions in those terms. And if you want to motivate someone else to do something, describing it in the why terms will often help persuade them to give it a try. Now, why should you think about your what, as in your concrete terms? So, is it ever helpful to think about the things we do in nitty gritty, what am I literally doing ways? Yes. For one thing, it turns out that thinking this way is really, really useful when you need to do something that is difficult, unfamiliar, complex, or just takes a lot of time to learn. And the reality is, if you are trying to achieve something, you're probably going to do something that is difficult, unfamiliar, complex, and takes a lot of time to learn. So, if you've never operated a vacuum cleaner before, you're actually better off thinking about sucking up the crumbs. So, the what, the concrete, the like what you're actually doing, rather than the keeping things clean, right? Or your identity. I'm the type of person who keeps things clean, your why. So, an example of this is the coffee mug experiment. So, in this experiment, half of the people who participated in this study got to drink out of a normal everyday mug here, and the other half were given a much more unwieldy mug weighing nearly half a pound. And so, for context, this was back in the 1980s. Big coffee cups were very rare back then, and so people wouldn't really know how to use a really big coffee cup. And so when they were asked to choose the best descriptions for what they had done, the people that had who got to drink out of a typical coffee mug tended to prefer the why descriptions over the what descriptions. In other words, under normal conditions, people who are used to drinking coffee preferred talking about it in terms of a reason why they were drinking, right? I'm getting energized, I'm staying refreshed, right? I'm having a lovely cup of coffee, right? But the heavy mug drinkers strongly preferred the more concrete what descriptions. They were thinking about the specific actions they were taking, like raising a cup to my lips. So, in order to actually manage to drink out of a cup that was much heavier than anything they normally use without spilling, right, spilling the coffee, these people needed to think about the real mechanics of coffee drinking. They needed to concentrate on the what of what they were doing. So, grasping the handle firmly, raising the cup to the lips, swallowing, rather than the big picture, the why of I'm getting energized. And so, by focusing on the concrete what, they were able to successfully drink the odd and unfamiliar cup without making a mistake. In other words, the harder a task is, the more apparent the what or your concrete steps in your mind needs to be. Again and again, we find that when actions are difficult to accomplish, it is easier and more helpful to think about what we are doing in concrete what terms rather than the lofty, more abstract why reasons, right? And so, for example, athletes visualize. It's really common to hear athletes visualize, but they don't always visualize about the moment of victory or the moment where a someone in charge puts a gold medal around the neck, right? They visualize the concrete steps on the track. They visualize leaning right, leaning left, leaning down, leaning backwards, right, when they need balance, right? They visualize going past a curve here, going past a curve there. They are visualizing the more concrete steps, right? And since both the big picture why and the nitty-gritty what modes of thinking have the advantages and disadvantages, the best strategy is to shift your thinking style to match the goal you want to achieve. So to get motivated and enhance your self-control, think why. If you want to be an athlete, like a winter Olympian or something like that, and you can't get off the couch, right? What's your why? What's your big reason, right? You want to, show people that you are someone who can achieve big things, right? You want to, whatever your why is for being an athlete. But if you're right about to take on a race, you're nervous, you're going up against really tough opponents, and you want to tackle a particular complicated, difficult, or unfamiliar goal, on the other hand, it's best to think about your what. It's best to visualize for more concrete steps. Now, number 3, beating procrastination. So why thinking leads you to pay more attention to what psychologists call desirability information. In other words, whether or not taking that action or achieving that goal will result in good things for you. And so, in other words, only thinking big picture leads to overthinking decisions. If you're trying to think, well, here's my big goal. My goal is to be an Olympic athlete. Is jogging going to help me get there? Or maybe I should try another sport? Or is this sport going to be better? Or is this sport going to be better? You kind of lead to more overthinking, right? And if we think about in our careers, if we want to achieve, I want to be partner at this law firm, then you might tend to overthink decisions, right? And so more concrete what thinking leads you to place more weight on feasibility information. So whether or not you can actually do whatever needs to be done. When we consider doing something in the near future, this is what we spend most of our time thinking about. So thinking what when it comes to your goals is an excellent way to not only be more realistic with your time and be more practical, but also to prevent procrastination. For example, the university survey experiment. In one study, Lieberman, Trope, McCrae, and Stephen Sherman asked undergraduates to complete a short survey and return it via email within 3 weeks in order to receive a cash prize. Before receiving the survey, each participant, so each university undergraduate student, completed a task designed to put them in either a why thinking or a what thinking mindset. The researchers then recorded how long it took for the students to achieve their goal by completing the survey and send it back. Remarkably, the ones that had been encouraged to think what sent in their surveys nearly 10 days earlier on average than those who thought why, so those who thought in the big picture. So thinking about your goal with a what mindset leads you to focus on a specific action you need to take, which helps you act more quickly in achieving it. Focusing too much on why you want to do something, on the other hand, may lead to you being rather sluggish when it comes to actually doing it. In other words, if you're visualizing, right, if you're imagining what you're going to do for the day or the rest of the week, visualize the concrete tasks required to complete the task, as in addition to visualizing your big why, your big reason for doing something. So, in summary, for this part, big picture why thinking about your goal is most helpful for getting you motivated and energized, and focusing on the rewards you can gain, and encouraging self-control and persistence. And I'd even add, really good for risk taking. If you're going to take a really big risk, you want to imagine your why. But nitty gritty what thinking will benefit you most when your goal involves doing something really difficult or unfamiliar, and focusing on the practical details of getting the job done and helping you to avoid procrastination. Okay, number 4, I think this is the last one, positive thinking. So, the world loves an optimist, and the good news is that optimism comes pretty naturally to most of us. In studies of optimists' beliefs, psychologists routinely believe that most of us believe that we are much more likely than our peers to have good things happen to us, to have successful careers, to own our own homes, to make lots of money, and live past 90. In other words, humans do naturally think quite positively, and the problem is we often think too positively about the wrong things. Let's get into it. So, Pretend for a moment that you have the goal of losing weight, right? You want to look slimmer or whatever. And so there are at least two ways in which you can think positively about this goal of losing weight. Number one, you can say to yourself, I have the ability to lose weight, and I am confident that I can reach my goal. In other words, you can think positively about your chances for success. Number two, you can say to yourself, I will easily be able to avoid temptations like donuts and potato chips, and I have no problem sticking to my new exercise regime. I'll have no problem whatsoever. In other words, you think very positively about how easily you will overcome obstacles to your success. Now, most self help books talk about the importance of being positive when it comes to reaching your goals, and they lump both of these kinds of positive thinking together. And they will tell you to believe that you will win and believe that you will win easily. But there's a problem. So, unfortunately, lumping both kinds of thinking together is a big mistake because one form of positive thinking is a great thing to do, and the other is a total no no and is a recipe for success. So, what actually works? Believing that you will succeed really does make you more likely to succeed. For example, the home gym equipment survey. So, in this study, the people in this study who believed that they could actually use the home gym equipment once they purchased it rather than allow it to just collect dust were nearly 3 times as likely as those who doubted themselves to still be using the equipment a year later on. So, in other words, again, believing you will succeed really does make you more likely of being able to succeed. So surely it must be good to imagine yourself succeeding easily, avoiding temptations, and overcoming obstacles with the slightest of effort, right? Actually, it's really, really wrong. So, psychologist Gabriel Etigen, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, has extensively studied the motivational impact of believing you will succeed versus believing that you will succeed easily, and has found time and time again that these beliefs have very different effects on achievement. For example, weight loss again. So women who imagined that the path to weight loss would be easy lost an average of 24 pounds less, or 10.8 kilograms less, than those who imagined themselves having a hard time resisting temptation. In other words, the ladies who imagined themselves having a tough time resisting temptations, right, like sweet treats or very tasty food, actually lost on average 10.8 kilograms more than the ones who thought it would come easily, right? And there's even this image here, 7-day weight loss meal plan. Anyone who's actually lost weight knows you're not going to achieve it in 7 days. It's tough. It's really tough, especially someone like me. I used to be a little bit chubby. I used to be a little bit skinny fat. I tried to lose weight and I failed nonstop for 9 months. And only after the 9 month did it just click. And it's like, oh, maybe I should just try counting calories instead of doing all these, hacks or whatever, or these, this diet, that diet. And once I did that, once I had something that I could do consistently and factored in that obstacles will come into my way and that this won't be easy and I'll be tempted by the foods I love, that was the only way I was actually able to lose weight. And so Uttergen and her colleagues found the same pattern. And they found it when looking at students in search for high paying jobs after college or university, at single individuals looking to form lasting romantic relationships, and at seniors recovering from hip replacement surgery. No matter who they are and what they're trying to do, we find that successful people not only have the confidence that they will eventually succeed, but are equally confident that they will have a tough time getting there. One more time. I thought it was as a really good line. I just want to repeat it one more time. No matter who they are and what they are trying to do, we find that successful people not only have confidence that they will eventually succeed, but are equally confident that they will have a tough time getting there, right? Great. And so Etigen's studies show that people who believe goal pursuits will be difficult, they plan more, they put in more effort, and they take more action in pursuit of their goals. They expect to have to work hard, and that's exactly what they do. In contrast, people who believed that getting a good job after college or university would be easy sent out fewer applications. Those who imagine themselves falling quickly and mutually in love with a secret crush were less likely to actually talk to that person about their feelings. Students who thought doing well on an upcoming exam would be a piece of cake, those are the ones who studied far fewer hours. Patients who imagine themselves getting around effortlessly on their brand new hip after a hip replacement surgery didn't work as hard on rehabilitation exercises. Ultimately, people who think that reaching their goal will be a breeze simply aren't prepared for what lies ahead of them, and they can be devastated when the dreams they've enjoyed dreaming about so much don't actually come true. In other words, if you're sad about a failure, ask yourself, did I actually accurately imagine how hard this challenge or this goal would really be? So, what's the optimal strategy? The optimal strategy when setting a goal seems to be to think positively about how it will feel when you achieve that goal, right? That it will feel great to achieve it and that you are someone who can achieve it, while thinking realistically about what it takes to get there, what obstacles will come in the way. Oxygen refers to this as mental contrasting. First, you imagine attaining your goal, and then you reflect on the obstacles that stand in the way. If you want to get a high paying job after college, start by imagining yourself accepting an offer at a top firm, and then think about what stands between you and the offer, namely, all the other really outstanding candidates who will be applying. And it kind of makes you want to send out a lot of applications, doesn't it? Right? Imagine if you're going up all about all this competition, you're probably going to have to work really hard to get that good role. You're probably going to have to get an internship first. If you want to get an internship, you're going to have to do well on that interview to get the internship. It might be, well, it will be helpful if you have all this competition to get some work experience while you're studying at university, right? And so that feeling that I need to act, this is called the necessity to act, and it's a psychological state that's crucial for achieving your goal, and it happens. You can get it when you imagine and visualize the inevitable obstacles that you will find along the way. And so when mental contrast is used, the users routinely outperform those who are equally confident but whose thoughts are all about imagining just the happy ending. So, in studies of 12-year-olds learning a foreign language, 15-year-olds doing test prep over a summer break, adults trying to attract a mate, right, a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or a husband or a wife, and nurses trying to improve communications with parents, mental contrasting led to greater effort, energy, planning, and overall higher rates of achieving their goals. And so, one more time, mental contrasting led to greater effort, energy, planning, and overall higher rates of achieving goals. So, yeah, imagine your obstacles. And so, one more example, hopefully an example. And so, in the study of effectiveness of mental contrasting with hospital HR personnel, the managers trained to use the strategy reported 2 weeks later that they had improved time management and found it easier to make decisions. They behaved more rationally, more efficiently, and were much happier at work because of it. And the price of all this efficiency and happiness, taking a few moments to learn a very simple technique that can be applied to every goal you're pursuing. And so I thought I would also include this. This came early in the book. I thought it was really good. In one study of nearly 3,000 federal employees, those who agreed with statements like, "My job is challenging," and "people in my work group are expected to work hard," were the ones who had the highest ratings on their annual performance reviews. In other words, when people accept that the job is really challenging and really difficult, they tend to work harder and therefore they achieve more. So, if you want to be a high performer in your job or a business, you need to accept that your work is challenging, that there is obstacles. You can overcome these obstacles, and you need to imagine yourself actively overcoming these obstacles. What will they be, and how will you overcome them? Right. And by the way, if you want to know more about this, it's on Amazon. Rethinking Positive Thinking. This is by the researcher Gabrielle Ettigen. Again, I hope I pronounced that right. And there's an audiobook. The audiobook is 5 hours and 30 minutes, which isn't bad for an audiobook. So, in conclusion, what does the research tell us about setting our goals? One, make the goal ultra specific. Don't just say, do your best. Yeah. No, what actually do you want to achieve? Right. That's your goal. Also, make the goal challenging but achievable. Right? Tough is like, oh, I'll have to work hard to make this come true. Okay, that's really good. That's a really good way to set that goal. 3, think and visualize equally about your why, right? Your big picture and your what, the concrete steps that you'll have to do every single day to make that achievable. Think positively about, so yeah, 4, think positively about your ability to achieve your goal, and then realistically about the obstacles you will inevitably encounter. It might be useful actually to track down, like, if let's say you're avoiding work or avoiding your whatever you're trying to accomplish, write down what's actually getting in the way. And over a few days, you're going to figure out, okay, what are the main types of obstacles that are getting in my way, right? It might be, at least for me, it's these intellectual curiosity rabbit holes, right? I like reading and learning, all that sort of stuff. I can very easily go down a rabbit hole of I like just spending 3 or 4 hours learning brand new facts, and oh, isn't this cool? Wow, like look about this part of history, or look at this. I never even knew anything about this country. Let me learn all this, and just wasting hours, right? That's my main obstacle, and that's something that now from this, I'm I actively write every day when I spend 20 minutes reflecting at the start of the day, and 20 minutes reflecting on my day at the end of the day. And both times I imagine, okay, what obstacles are going to come up? I'm going to be really motivated to like learn all these facts, or read books and not actually do my work. It's like, okay, that's an obstacle that will come up. I need to I need to think in my mind, that obstacle is going to come up. How am I going to deal with it? Right? What can I do? I can keep a piece of scrap paper and write down every time I want to Google something. Oh, I want to know this fact here, this fact here. I can write down what I want to see, and so okay, so I can save that for later after I've accomplished what I want to accomplish for today. Right? I'll write down those notes. If you figure out what your most likely obstacles are going to be, it's going to help you a lot. And number 5, use mental contrasting to set your goals. So that's the video. Hope it was useful. If you have any feedback, let me know in the comments. And yeah, thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your day, guys. See ya. Bye 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 bye.